Which American accent will be the hardest to understand for me as a French person? So I asked you to tell me the most difficult American accents, and today we're gonna be listening to them and rank them from easiest to hardest in my opinion. And we're gonna go pretty much all around the US, but we're gonna start in Louisiana because it's the place you guys told me would be the hardest to understand for me. And before we get into the Cajun accent, I wanted to show you this really cool video I found about the New Orleans accent.
The New Orleans accent comes from multiple cultures that's been here, and over time I think we've adapted to different languages, whether it's French, Spanish, even a little bit of other cultures like Italian and German, and also African American.
So what I love about this clip is that he tells us about the many different cultural influences that go into an accent, and you will see in this video one of the reasons I find accents so cool is because they tell us both about our history but also about our identity.
But the kind of accent I have is Creole and New Orleans mix.
I think for me, I was raised right here on the bayou. I lived here my whole life, and it's the way everybody around here talks.
Nobody around here thinks they got an accent. They say, look at that guy, he got an accent.
I love that because we all have an accent no matter where we're from. And I'll tell you a bit more about it, but growing up with a regional accent, I didn't know I had an accent and I thought other people had one as well, so I really relate to what he said. But the reason why I love this video is because they show different people from different areas of the city and they all have a different accent. So even in a tiny area, the way we speak can vary a lot. And often when you have an accent, it comes with specific words that show you're from a specific place. So now let's listen to a few specific words from the uptown part of New Orleans.
Now we uptown, UTP. What's up, Woody? That mean your partner, somebody from uptown. It's my home. Now I might buy me a house somewhere and doing like that there, but I ain't gonna never leave from uptown. It's where I know.
And there's so many different words from different areas, so if there's a word from your specific area, please share it with me in the comments. I'd love to read it.
To me, it doesn't sound any different, but I've had people say I sound like I'm from New York,
so true.
Brooklyn, Cajun. I think a lot of times people get Cajun and Creole mixed up. I don't sound Cajun, I just sound New Orleans or Creole.
Right, I totally agree with what he said. If I met this man randomly, I would think he's from New York City. I don't know if you're hearing it too or if it's just me, but that could just be because I lived in New York City in the past, so I know this accent pretty well. We'll talk about the NYC accent in a bit, but he also mentions the Cajun accent, which is one you guys had a lot to say about. So I already made a video about Cajun French right here where I go into a bit more detail, but what you have to know is that a lot of Cajuns grew up hearing French, either because they are native speakers themselves or because they have family members who speak French, but there are also many other influences that go into the Cajun French accent. And if you're new here, I'm also a native French speaker from France, so I want you to listen carefully and try to point out differences and similarities between their accent and my accent when you listen to this next video. So this one is from Jourdan Thibodeau, and I already mentioned him in my other video, and I really like his work sharing Cajun French, and here he's also interviewing real people and asking them to speak in their real accent. And I love that because when we speak about accents, a lot of people try to imitate accents or put on fake accents. We'll get a bit into why when we get into the Boston accent later, but first let's listen to his video.
Do you have any nicknames?
No one has asked me that in a long time. My dad would call me Jules. His grandma's name was Julie, and they said I act just like her.
Okay, so I don't understand why you guys told me this was gonna be the hardest accent because I understand her perfectly.
You speak any French?
I can understand a little bit of it, but I don't speak it. I can say comment ça va? Ça va bien? My grandpa would always say bonsoir.
I love to see her French heritage, and I feel you can really hear it in some people's accents, like this young man in the next video.
What you like to do on the weekend?
Well, normally I'm working, but I like to go in the woods come hunting season, and when I get a chance, go fishing. The tail brings you there. Come out down me, down the portage. Instead of going to Catahoula, you go like you're going to parks, heading straight for nursery. Before you make the loop, where it comes back to the portage, you take a left, and it's gonna be a little cut. It'll be 15, 20 foot, c'est le bayou.
So I don't know if you can hear it, but to me, he sounds very, very French in his accent. I actually even have a French friend who has a similar accent when he speaks English, and I don't think he has ever been to Louisiana. So I'm gonna currently rank this accent easier to understand for me. That's maybe because I'm French, but I feel the intonation, like the music of the words, is very similar to French. And it's funny because in these videos, there's always French people in the comments who agree with me, and they say stuff like, oh, finally I understand English. So as you can see, my ranking is gonna be very subjective because I feel whether you understand an accent or not is kind of based on how used you are to listening to it. And as Jourdan Thibodeau says,
There's a lot of different accents in South Louisiana.
so keep that in mind when you're watching this video. I won't be able to cover every single accent ever, but I'd love for you to leave me a comment with any accent you want me to include next time. So as you can probably tell with my accent, English is not my first language. And the first time I heard a regional American accent was when I tried watching The Departed, which is a Scorsese movie about cops and gangs set in South Boston. So in France, movies are usually dubbed in French. And at the time I was trying to learn English and I decided to watch the original English version. And I can tell you that the only thing I understood in this movie was the F word, which is said exactly 237 times. And it's maybe because I like crime movies or the tough guy with a big hard character trope. But since then, I've watched so many Boston movies and I couldn't help but notice that not every actor can imitate the Boston accent. So let's listen to a real Boston accent in this next video called Siri and the Boston Accent.
I'm Billy Baker from Boston. I'm trying to see if this phone will recognize my voice with my Boston accent, so they tell me I have one. Where is the closest Starbucks?
I found 17 places matching Starbucks.
I love this guy's energy. Okay, so as you can tell, this is a video from 14 years ago, and Siri understood him on this one, which, you know, is pretty impressive because Siri didn't understand my accent when I spoke English at the time.
Can I park my car in Harvard Yard?
I'm not aware of any appointments about haven't yet.
So for this one, Siri doesn't understand. And also, if you have a regional accent, there's always a sentence everyone wants you to say, and it can get a bit annoying. And if you're from Boston, people want you to say this one in particular. So when you're learning English as a foreign language, you're learning something that's called Standard English or General English, which are two words I'm not really a fan of. And that means that you speak a version of English that doesn't really stand out as being from a specific place or a specific culture. You know, like the ones you hear in TV shows or in the news. And to understand why I'm not a fan of this expression, let's watch this clip.
I have what I would call a suppressed Boston accent that I got here at my childhood home in Somerville on the corner of Pearson Ave and Kidder Ave between Ball Square and Davis Square. But when I went to college here at Emerson, I was told that I better start pronouncing my R's or I would never be a news reporter.
So I find this clip so fascinating because the exact same thing happened to me. I grew up with a regional accent from the south of France. And when I moved to Paris for my studies, no one was taking me seriously. Like, for example, I had a geopolitics teacher write in my official college report that I quote, my melodic southern accent reminded him of his summer vacation, which, you know, kind of pissed me off because that's not the first thing you should think about when I'm giving a presentation about like the impact of Cold War on today's politics. So yeah, I totally get where the news reporter comes from, but it's kind of sad that we have to change our accents. So in terms of ranking, I don't really understand why, but the Boston accent often gets ranked as most annoying or most funny accent. And as a non-native English speaker, I do not get it. To the untrained ear, it sometimes sounds a bit British, but my opinion, and you will see that when we get into other accents that are discriminated against. I think this is just rooted in classism. So for my ranking, remember that it's very subjective. I'm just ranking things on how easy it is for me to understand. And I'm gonna be ranking the Boston accent last so far because I really had to train my ear to understand it back when I was learning English. So as I was telling you, in my 20s, I tried to hide my regional accent. But then I moved to New York City, which is a place that definitely made me feel better about having an accent. So I want you to think about the New York accent. Which one are you thinking about? So a few years ago, there was the best New York accent contest, and people nominated their friends who have strong accents to compete.
Want to hear the best New York accent?
Best New York accent.
Best New York accent.
If you don't use your hands when you talk,
Is it even a New York accent?
To be honest, I think I'm like the best contender.
I don't know what coffee is. I know what coffee is.
Nico told me he was putting together a best New York accent contest. You already know.
I love how many different accents there are in New York City. Obviously, some of these are a tiny bit exaggerated because you don't speak the same way to enter an accent contest or, when you're at work. But let's listen to the guy who won.
So, Charlie, why do you like to come to the panini shop?
To come and see my friends, talk to them. I was born here. You weren't. Go back to Italy. The food is good. Give me my usual. Taking all the American dollars and bringing it back to Italy. I get my coffee. I tell Joey about the cold cuts, what I want. And that's it.
So this is the New York Italian-American accent, and it is the type of accent we most associate with New York because of the movies. But it's actually not the most common New York accent because around 50% of New Yorkers speak another language than English. So obviously the New York accent is gonna be influenced by that because there's around 700 languages represented in NYC. The biggest ones are Spanish, then we have Chinese languages, South Asian languages, and then French and French Creoles. So this means that there are so many different accents linked to people's heritage, so pretty much any accent you thought about before, you are right, because there's an incredible diversity of accents in NYC. And I personally love this because I instantly felt accepted as a foreigner. Pretty much everyone understood me, even though I had a way stronger accent at the time. So in terms of ranking, I'm gonna rank all New York accents number 2, because they're also easy to understand for me because I used to live there and it was amazing to hear so many different accents on the daily. And by the way, last time I was in New York City, I took some time to discover things I hadn't done before back when I was living there. So I went to the American Museum of Natural History, which I had been wanting to see since I watched Night at the Museum. And I also went to see Wicked the musical. And I've booked these activities on Klook. Klook is a long-term sponsor of the channel, and they're an app where you can book pretty much any travel experience all around the world. So for example, I've also used them to go on top of the Rockefeller Center in NYC, but also to visit the Louvre in Paris or the Musée Rodin. They also have a lot of cool, unique activities like a champagne wine tour in France. But the best thing about them has to be their travel passes. For example, in Paris, you can get the Klook Paris Pass, where you can book up to 6 activities at a discounted rate. There are so many activities to choose from, and they are available in many cities around the world like NYC, Rome, London, or Tokyo. So if you're planning a trip, go click the link in the description below and use my code LucileWhiteyKlook for a discount. But our accent also ties us to our history. And one way I could see that is when I discovered the High Tiders accent, which is also called Outerbanks English, which is this coastal region in North Carolina that seems so beautiful. And I have to admit, I first heard about it from the TV show Outer Banks, and it's one of the most unique American accents I've ever heard.
I told it on the side of the last night, the water fire, night moonshine, no fish. Why both matter, Uncle Woods?
So yeah, obviously I don't understand anything, so we're gonna play it again with subtitles.
I told it on the side of the last night, the water fire, night moonshine, no fish. Why both matter, Uncle Woods?
It's so funny how much just seeing the words written really helps understanding stuff. Like I feel like I'm training my ear on that specific accent. And I also feel this is one of the accents that sounds English and not American. I've heard this accent described as Elizabethan English or talking like pirates. And that makes sense historically, because the people who live on Ocracoke Island descend from people who arrived by boat from southwest of England in the 1700s. And what's cool for accent lovers like me is that they kept their accent, and it evolved independently because they were isolated from the mainland for centuries because the islands are just pretty far away from it. And apparently I'm not the only one to think that they're not from the US.
They asked me where I was from. They thought I was from overseas somewhere. They didn't think, they wanted to know if I was American. I said, yeah. So they said, you talk funny. Said, you don't talk like we do. Well, they didn't talk like I did either.
Yeah, people make fun of us, yeah. You hear people make fun of us. But that's all right, because we think they talk different too, so.
But now being isolated is a thing of the past, and there's a ferry that goes from these islands to the mainland, so this accent has been on the decline. In 2024, only half of the 676 people of Ocracoke Island spoke with this accent. And to see what people thought about it when it was happening, I found this documentary from 1997, and they asked locals what they thought about how the opening of the islands to tourists impacted the dialect.
Tourists comes in in summer, and I guess, but I don't know, and you get hearing that language, it blends in.
Yeah, there's a lot of new people, you know, coming in and everything, and it's changed a lot in the last few years. In the last 20 years, most of it's been lost.
So lucky today we know that this way of speaking is still alive, even though it has been evolving, because accents and dialects constantly evolve due to contact with outsiders. So in terms of ranking, this is obviously the hardest for me to understand. And it is obvious that this ranking is so linked to how much I've heard this accent before. And this is why it's so important to have different accents in media, like in TV, on the news, or even in audiobooks. And I actually discovered the next accent, which is Appalachian English, through an audiobook. So I really like reading Barbara Kingsolver, and I decided to listen to her new book called Demon Copperhead, which is set in Appalachia and has the narrator reading in that accent. I'm not really sure how authentic the accent is, but to the untrained ear, it's pretty well done, and it made me want to learn more about the area. Then I discovered this beautiful YouTube channel called Celebrating Appalachia, where the host Tipper shows us her culture.
So if you've never been to the mountains of Appalachia, maybe you've never heard the beautiful accent. If you have, then you're very familiar with it. I have a very strong mountain accent, so you're hearing it right now from me for sure. But I'm very partial to the language of Appalachia. I love the way we say the words, the colorful phrases, the way it sounds on the ear. I love it because it speaks of home to me.
So I fully agree with her. I find her accent very beautiful. And I love what she said when she says that it speaks of home to her. I don't know if you feel this way, but when I hear people speaking with a Toulouse accent, which is my hometown, it makes me happy. I just enjoy it. So let me know if you feel the same way.
People who sound like me often get belittled for being uneducated and unintelligent. And of course, it's not just the Appalachian accent that's stereotyped. Any accent that doesn't sound like mainstream or Main Street USA can be maligned.
I find what she says so interesting because with every accent there are stereotypes that are linked to it, and often some regional accents can have negative stereotypes and there can be a pressure to lose that accent and speak in a more general way. Then in the rest of the video she also speaks about how people sometimes accuse her of perpetuating bad grammar. It's so stupid because we all have different ways of speaking and there's absolutely no need to standardize things. So in terms of ranking, I'm gonna rank this accent towards the middle. At first it was a bit hard for me to understand, but I've since then listened to a 20-hour audiobook with that accent, so I now understand it very well. Switching on to an accent that was highly requested, the Baltimore accent.
Baltimore is more natural for us that's from here to just be like Baltimore, like
more like there's a D in there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've always heard it this way. I think I've said Baltimore before. Then in the video they interview Dr. Intia de Shields, who is a Baltimore accent researcher.
You tend to take on the cultural and linguistic characteristics of your community. Baltimore had one of the largest free Black populations in the nation. Through that kind of isolation over time, that is what kind of creates this distinct Black Baltimore sound and white Baltimore sound. The white Baltimore accent has the Scots-Irish influence, that kind of Appalachian twang. So you'll get that hun, how you doing, hun?
There's many components to it, you know. A lot of O's, obviously.
Hollandtown instead of Highlandtown.
You know, Danny Ocean.
That makes so much sense. I totally hear the link with the Appalachian accent here. And you know, I've been to Baltimore, I've heard the accent, but often when I hear it out of context, I can't really place it, so that might be why. Also, if you're wondering why the researcher only has a light accent.
I was coming up, I was encouraged to lose my Baltimore accent. I was encouraged to soften it.
I remember growing up and trying not to speak true Baltimore.
It's almost impossible for anyone to always sound like the dictionary. It's inevitable.
All right, so if even a doctor of linguistics and an accent researcher is encouraged to lose her accent, I feel there is no hope for the rest of us.
It's what makes us who we are. It's what distinguishes us.
Even if you don't like the accent, it's still a part of who you are at the end of the day.
Be who you are, embrace your accent, do what you must do to shine.
This lady has such a positive energy and I wish she was one of my professors in college because I would have kept my accent, I feel. So in terms of ranking, I'm gonna put the Baltimore accent right above the Boston one because I understand it well, but it's hard for me to recognize it. Okay, so next is Miami. So I visited last year, and if you didn't know, I'm also a native speaker of Spanish since my dad is from the country of Spain. So it was super cool to mostly speak Spanish in Miami when I was there. And when I spoke English, I absolutely loved how English and Spanish mixed together into the accent. So let's watch the next video, which is about how the Miami accent is actually influenced by the Spanish from Cuba.
You know, it's strange because our families came during a hard times when there was really this big wave of Cubans coming to the United States, especially in Miami. It was a change for our families, and now for us it seems so normal to speak English and Spanish, but back then it really wasn't praised.
So first reaction, I do hear the influence of Spanish really well. To me, it feels like American English, but with the music of Spanish from Latin America. Because the music of Spanish from Spain, where I'm from, is pretty different, I'd say. A bit like how British English and American English are different. But also I want to touch on the fact that she says that speaking Spanish wasn't praised. And it's really something that makes me sad because the US is the second largest Spanish-speaking country. And as I've said before, the fact that the US is built on many different waves of immigration is something that I like and that makes me feel accepted as a foreigner. And I really wish that people anywhere would not be targeted for the language they speak or the accent they have. Another thing they speak about in this video that makes Miami English so special is what's called calques, which are direct translations of Spanish into English, like
Thanks God.
Oh, let's make a party.
Make the line. If you're from Miami, you have most definitely said, that's super cute, or that's super Miami.
Alright, I didn't know super was considered a calque. I use super all the time because both in French and in Spanish, people say super all the time. Like if something is cool, you'd say in French super, which means like cool, amazing. Or if you want to accentuate something, you would say something like c'est super cool. It's like, it's very cool. And I use super so much that people have been complaining about it in the comments. So I didn't know that was a calque. Like, do you use super a lot if you're a native English speaker? And where do you come from? So I find this concept of calque super cool because it shows how languages borrow from each other all the time. And I've talked about the French words that are used in English in this video, but around 30% of English words actually come from French. So that's something that happens all the time in every language. But in terms of ranking, the Miami accent is actually super easy to understand for me. But another accent I like and that I recently heard a lot of is the Texas accent. So I was in Texas last fall, and a thing I really wanted to do was trying authentic Texas barbecue, and I went to Terry Black's and I really loved it. So I wanted to listen to a video of the owners of Terry Black's barbecue, including Mr. Terry Black himself.
Our cooking technique is very labor intensive. We just don't, set the fire at a certain temperature and just leave it on for 8 hours and take it off.
So yeah, Mr. Terry Black has a strong Texas accent, but I understand it very well. Actually, the Texas accent is one of the famous accents abroad. So when you're learning English, if you ever have a day about different accents, this would be one of the accents shown.
Of course, we're in Central Texas, so we're known for brisket. But what really separates us from a lot of people is the giant beef rib. It's just it's a ribeye on a stick. It's prime rib on a stick. It's an awesome cut of meat. It's juicy, it's rich, it's prime.
Wow, so first of all, this made me so hungry. This is actually part of one of the things we ate in Texas, so I really wish I could eat that right now. But in terms of accent, these two are the sons. And as you can see, in the younger generation, their accent is already way lighter. And it's interesting to point that out because there's a lot of talk about regional accents disappearing with the newer generations. And as someone who lost her regional accent, I get it because now we have so many more influences, like from movies, TVs, online, and also we move around more than our parents' generation. So I get it, but it also makes me a bit sad because our accent is our identity. And I don't know, I'm just hopeful this video will inspire you to embrace your own unique way of speaking. So yeah, I really enjoyed discovering the accents in this video. Let me know in the comments which ones I missed. And go watch the videos that are on screen next. I think you'll like them and I'll see you there.